So hopefully you all heard the robot voice tell you that you're being recorded. Okay. All right. Well, welcome. I'm Phoebe Walker. I'm from the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, but I'm here in my hat as a member of the Western Mass Public Health Association's Executive Committee. And we have now begun, hopefully you got a newsletter from us in the recent past, in the last week or two, with an announcement about this, this workshop and a number of other workshops that are sort of short opportunities to spend an hour digging into an important public health issue. The next one we have is on some private well legislation that's being proposed. And the next one after that, there will be one on epidemiology 101. And then we've got one more, which I'm forgetting what it is right now, but I'll go find it and see what it is and remind people about it at the end. So if you're just joining us, you just came in, if you could put your name, town, and role, and whether you've worked with this program at the AG's office in the chat, that would be great. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maya Kazmirchuk, who's been at the AG's office for about 10 years and leading this division for about 3. And she is going to tell us all about how the Neighborhood Renewal Division works. Take it away, Maya.
Thank you. Just as Phoebe said, I'm Maya. I'm from the Attorney General's office. I recognize a couple names, and I know that I've seen people put in the chat they've worked with our office before, so sorry if it's sort of redundant. I did change it up a little bit, so hopefully there'll be something that is a little bit for everyone and not too boring. We do have like sort of a standardized presentation, but I might skip over a couple things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see sort of the beginning of the PowerPoint.
Yep, we can.
Thank you. All right. If anybody has any questions, they can just let me know or wait to end, however you feel is fine with me. Sometimes I just start talking because I get excited about housing and the Neighborhood Renewal Division. We recently changed from the Abandoned Housing Initiative about almost 2 years ago now. So we're still focusing on abandoned housing and receivership work, but we're trying to expand. We still don't know exactly how that plan is. We've done a couple things here and there, but we're always looking for ideas if anybody has any for sort of expansion on our division. Just to start off, in case anyone doesn't know, the current Attorney General is Maura Healy. She's the Chief Lawyer and Law Enforcement Officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There she is. And then here's our quick legal disclaimer. This is a brief synopsis just provided for introductory informational purposes only, is not legal advice and should not be construed as an attempt to provide a legal opinion about any of the matters discussed herein. Okay, so our mission kind of changed a little bit. We're still focusing, like I said, on abandoned housing, but our mission is just mainly to ensure safer neighborhoods by working with municipalities to rehabilitate homes in violation of the state sanitary code into safe, habitable homes. And so whether this is, just an informal conversation, discussions, or agreements with stakeholders or owners, or if it's through the formal legal process through court, we're still willing to work with owners and willing to put forth the effort to try to change homes that look like this house here on the left to the house on the right. This is a property actually in Irving, and the person who purchased it actually, I believe, grew up down the street, and he would, drive by regularly. His parents still live there, and he just kind of started talking with the receiver, and he ended up actually purchasing the property once the receiver was complete. So it's great when things like that happen. So sort of just kind of going briefly to the beginning of Neighborhood Renewal Division, or NRD, and sometimes we like to call ourselves NERD. So we've had some sort of abandoned housing initiative in the office since about '95. And it all started through the AG's Safe Neighborhoods initiative, where the city of Boston identified about 100 abandoned properties. And so through grants through our office and volunteer employees through our office, we work through trying to mainly get, so at this point, it was sort of a lot of these were also bank owned, just tried to get some responsibility from the banks to step up and make these, neighborhoods safer and to provide additional housing that was not being used at the time. So this map kind of also sort of shows the starting in 2009 when it became sort of a more sort of statewide program, I would say. Like I said, it started off in Boston, so we kind of spread it a little bit out in the western part of the state and sort of down to the south as well. As you can see here is mainly municipalities sort of in the bigger cities like New Bedford, Springfield, Lawrence, and then, these actually are just our partners at that time. And then in 2011, the AG saw that the benefits of a program and brought the program in-house. So we were actually operating from the general budget. At this time, we expanded to have more employees. And at this point, municipalities were reaching out to our office to partner and work with. And then we did, do presentations like this or work on handouts or pamphlets or practice manuals, best practices manuals with the court. So we started expanding a little bit more. And so the purple areas are still the municipalities that were partners at the time. The red dots sort of represent the amount of houses that were referred to our office by the municipalities. And this is just sort of a current-ish map of still foreclosures in the area. They're still kind of focused around the more urban areas of the state, but they're still happening. And as we know, that foreclosures lead to a lot of abandoned properties. This is sort of our representation of communities that we partner with now. I say this now because the person who really was great at using the software got a promotion. So, and it's sort of ever changing. We do get more municipalities that want to join our program. And so this also shows our 4 offices. I work in the Springfield office and I cover the 4 Western counties. Worcester covers Central. And then we have a couple people who are sort of in New Bedford and Boston that cover sort of that side of the state. And this is just our division right now. We're actually hiring for a paralegal to work with me in the Springfield office because I'm all by myself. But so we have, a smaller staff in the office, and some of the attorneys work on other cases as well. Actually, I should take that back. Most of the attorneys work on other cases as well from other divisions. Sometimes we have a little cross collaboration or there's some overlap in our subject matter area. So we take on cases from other areas. And then during COVID, we were also focusing on different types of issues that were important for the Attorney General. This is just a quick little snapshot. So we're currently working with about 152 municipality partners. We have just over 300 active properties, and out of those properties, just over 70 are in active litigation. So we're monitoring those for 300 plus cases, but as you can see, only a small portion are actually in active litigation. And this is just because sometimes we allow the sale of a property to go through. Sometimes the owner is actually making progress to make the code repairs, and just sometimes things take a while. Our approval and the approval process in our office can take a while. With COVID, it's slowed down, and then work has also slowed down with the receivers. And it's not that work isn't happening; it's just a little bit slower than it used to be. And I, full disclosure, our office is slow at working through things. We get there eventually. It's just we just have a lot of procedures to get through, and sometimes that bogs us down. But and then our last fiscal year sort of was slow on getting taxes returned to municipalities. We did just get about 440,000 taxes back. And so this happens once the receiver process usually is complete and the receiver's lien gets paid off, the first thing it gets paid off are back taxes. Normally we do run close to $900 or $1 million in back taxes when our program is sort of running at full speed. This is just sort of the authority that allows us to move forward with receiverships. It comes from Mass General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 1271I. And also, in addition to that statute, a case called City of Boston versus Rakelska. The statute mainly focused on occupied buildings and properties, dealing with code violations, and if they weren't properly remedied without the appointment of receiver, and that was in the best interest of the public, neighbors, the butters, etc., then the court could appoint a receiver. Mainly, we focus on abandoned properties, so of course that was sort of an issue, but then in the case law, the judge saw that there was a need for receivers to make repairs to properties, bringing them back up to code so they can become safer for the people around them, and they can become safe housing for the new person that's moving in. So the court ruled that the statute not only applies to occupied properties but unoccupied properties as well. So this is probably, besides the pictures, this is probably the best slide in the presentation because it shows our whole sort of procedure from the start to the end. So we will always rely on our municipality partners to identify and let us know of any distressed properties they want to have come into our program. So that, I mean, this is, it doesn't have to be formal. It can just be an email or a call. Normally I discuss them with the municipality. Usually it's a health agent. And then, we'll talk about the properties. We'll schedule a site visit. I have one actually, I think with Kurt, right, on Monday in Gill and Buckland. So we'll schedule the site visits. I'll usually go with a colleague of mine just because there's a lot that's happening. I have questions, and we always want to take photos so we can include those in the petition when we file with the court. So it's also, great to have somebody else there so I can be like, oh, was that at this property or that property? So we'll go ahead and do that. Normally, like I said, it's with a health agent, but I've gone to look at properties, from the street by myself during COVID. Not ideal, but we were making do. Sometimes there's fire department or some administrator. I've had town managers, so it can be whoever would like to come along. That's great. Once we complete the site visits, I'll have a little bit more conversation, maybe with the health agent or just my supervisor, just to see if we can get approval to take the properties into our program. Once that happens, we'll do a title search. We used to have a title search person who would do our title searches, and that was their main job. He went to law school, so we're relying on other staff in our office to do title searches. And also at this point in time, I'm usually thinking about what kind of receiver might want to take on the property, who might want to take it on. So I might be making a few calls. We do take municipalities considerations in mind here. If they think that somebody might be a great receiver, we can discuss that and see if they want to take the property on. The court has their own list, and we actually have our own pool that we're allowed to use. I think it's probably because we do a background check and we have an application interview process with the receivers. So normally we are allowed to put forth to the court which receiver we think is best for a property. So once that happens, what we'll do is we'll draft what's called a demand letter. In essence, it's a notice to the owner, anybody with a lien on the property, like a bank, that we intend to pursue receivership via the court process if the code violations aren't remedied. And then we put a copy of the statute in there. We put some sort of details about the property, half the roof is falling off, or there was a missing window. And then usually I think there's language about proper boarding and securing of the property. We'll give a deadline of 7 to 10 days. I will say that during COVID, I have had way more response from owners than I've had previously. And I don't really know why that is, but maybe it's just COVID. And so communication is always great. So at this point, we have a cooperative or uncooperative owner. Cooperative owners can turn into uncooperative owners fairly quickly. If we have an owner that reaches out and, they say, well, oh, that was my uncle's property, or, I was going to repair that. I just, X, Y, and Z happened, or I was trying to get a loan or whatever. So we'll see sort of what the situation is. We'll give them an opportunity to try to make the repairs. And we'll ask for plans or estimate from a contractor, and then we'll sort of touch base with the municipality and see how things are going. If they can, because different houses have different code violations and some are much more significant than others. A lot of times it's funding is an issue, or it's somebody who lives in Alaska and they don't want anything to do with this property that they inherited from their, aunt who passed away. So if it's that case, then we'll go ahead and move forward with a petition, or if it's an uncooperative owner that has said that they were going to fix the property or sell the property and did not, then we'll go ahead and we'll gather documentation we need for the petition. I'll request permission to file a petition. The petition package includes affidavits from myself, from usually somebody from the municipality, the health agent, and from the receiver, in addition to the actual petition asking the court to appoint the receiver and order. In the petition, there'll also be pictures, any violation notices or condemnation orders that were sent or sent to the owner or placed on the property. We'll put that whole package together. I'll get approval to file that, and then we'll file it for asking for a receiver to be appointed. Sometimes a receiver still won't get appointed. Sometimes the bank does step in and tries to foreclose on the property. We'll ask the bank to maintain. If they're not maintaining, then we'll ask for agreements going through that process. But hopefully we'll get to that box in the middle there, that peachy color box, that the property is no longer a threat to public health and safety or the property values, and try to get some tax money back for the municipality. Okay. I'm going to touch on a couple things in a little bit more detail, but does anybody have any questions? Okay. So we kind of have seen a little bit of different approaches that municipalities might have for referring properties to us. It can just be one house, sometimes there's like a neighborhood approach where we see that, especially before in the foreclosure crisis, where we've seen that banks were targeting specific areas and giving out specific loans to specific neighborhoods. So we can see sometimes that there's a bunch of foreclosed properties in a particular area. So that's fine as well. Sometimes we have a particular owner that may have a lot of properties that's not doing a great job at keeping up with not violating the sanitary code. So that's fine as well. And we can also we don't do strictly commercial unless it's a huge issue. I know we've done previously a quote unquote sort of long stay motel. So that was a definite issue. And so we did take that on, but normally it's a residential. It can be a little mixed use depending on how much of it is mixed use. But we'll always take a look at any property and discuss any property. That's perfectly fine. And so which properties work best? So vacant, and like I said, we do take occupied properties. And so, but the real, the perfect property, quote unquote, would be a property that has state code violations and needs repairs, but will not exceed the property value, the market value of the property. Because we want the receiver to be able to pay off their lien and not be in the red, so to speak. And that the taxes aren't so huge, that this makes it, because that can make it impossible. I mean, some properties have $300,000 in back taxes. So this is just sort of something that we do take a look at when we're thinking if a property will be great for our program or not. And sometimes we might not know. It might be the receiver, and different receivers can do different properties. They have different bandwidth. They have, access to different kinds of resources. So we've receivers have definitely told me no, and then I find another receiver. Sometimes finding receivers is difficult, but we just try our best. The property inspection, I kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't think I mentioned going inside. So most of the time we do exterior property visits, but if there is permission, or I know sometimes the police or fire chief will go in, if we just kind of follow the municipality lead. So I've definitely been inside some properties, and some properties usually we have enough to go by just being outside. So it's not necessarily to have an interior inspection at the onset. Normally the court will want some kind of a more specific report from the health agent or the municipality, just so the court has a understanding of exactly what needs to be repaired. Violation letters, I did talk about this. I know each municipality kind of has a different form, but generally they're the same. There's no sort of magic number on how many violations we need. We just like to show that there's a history of violations here that aren't being corrected. The town has given the owner this amount of time, or has sent multiple violation letters, condemnation orders, nothing's been changed. I mean, sort of the bottom line is we also want to make sure that we can report to the court that the municipality has done all this, our office has done all this, and the code violations are still not repaired. This is just a violation order, which everybody's probably seen. So this is just a picture of the I think it was like 1919 in Worcester County Registry of Deeds. Back in the day when you actually used to have to go down to the Registry of Deeds and look up whatever you want to look up. And I still remember doing that. I've actually done it before, but now everything is online pretty much. So we have that part is faster. It's just we still have the internal processes of trying to get the title search done. So here's just an example of our letter, and I used to have a bigger picture of that letter, and now I'm regretting that I didn't put that in there, so you probably can see it better. But I will send a copy of the slides to circulate if anybody wants to check it out. But in essence, it just kind of says public records indicate you're the owner. There's multiple code violations. Usually the property is condemned. Most of the properties we look at have already been condemned. We might put in something about a specific factor of what code violations are at the property that aren't being corrected, and then we'll wait to see for their response. I mean, right before I just filed a petition not that long ago, I sent the letter, I think in July or August, and I just got a call from the owner a couple of days before the petition. Was kind of a little odd that it was actually not even the owner, it was a friend of the owners, but it was actually odd that I got that call soon before I was going to file the petition. So sometimes they just pop up. This is just to put a note out there that we might have a pre-receivership agreement. They're not always written. Honestly, for the most part, they're just verbal, and if they can't fulfill what they've told us they're going to do, then we'll move forward with the petition. And then this, I already went over this, so this is just the petition stuff. Oh, and of course, sometimes we do have other agreements. In the western part of the state, we actually have what are called interim orders. Most of the time I draft them for the court, and it just sort of gives the background on the property, when the receiver was appointed, what the receiver's budget is, what their lien is up to right now, insurance information, if there's any concerns from the town, and then if there's anything else the court wants us to add. Sometimes if there is, sometimes the bank comes in and pays off the receiver's lien, so there might be things that we want the bank to take care of or secure, so we'll put that in the agreement, and then it will just be, if there's a reporting time frame for the receiver, then we'll have that in there, and then there'll be a next court date. But sometimes we do have much shorter ones that just kind of sort of explain sort of the facts, and then if we want the owner to agree to anything, with the bank to agree to anything, but usually the court wants sort of the more detailed ones. So getting a receiver appointed. So let me go back there. I talked a little bit how we have a pool and we have sort of an interview process. So the receiver has a super priority lien on the property, and the only thing that comes before that are municipal taxes or like a water sewer bill. Everything else is secondary to the receiver's lien, a mortgage, a judgment lien, all that is secondary. So once the receiver gets appointed, they will go into the property, make sure it's secure, sort of check out what they need to do, and they'll draft a rehab plan. The rehab plan gets reviewed by our office and then by the courts. And then after that, the rehab plan can be changed. It can be amended, but that has to be approved by the court. In the rehab plan, there's always a budget. And then we'll have periodical reviews about 6 to 8 weeks where the receiver will file a report showing all their expenses. We like to see sort of an estimate of what they're planning to do next, and then an estimate date of completion, if especially if they're closer to completing the property. So we review that, and then we'll have a hearing on that. We'll have that interim order that I spoke about a little bit before, and it'll keep going until the receiver is done. The receiver can, once the receiver is completed, they can either go ahead and foreclose on their lien after they get court permission, or they can list the property on the open market. Once again, they'll need court permission to do that. And then once a buyer is found and there's offer put in, the court also has to approve that as well. And then the receiver will pay off the property taxes and then foreclose on their lien or get paid by the buyer. And then, well, sometimes we're asked, what makes a great receiver? And so realistically, anybody can be a receiver as long as they show experience in rehabbing distressed properties. And we've had for-profit companies, non-for-profits, we've had construction companies of all sizes, community groups, and attorneys have all been receivers. So this is sort of our perfect example of a great property. So as you can, so the whole house represents sort of the market value of the property. So you can see at the bottom, we've got just a tiny amount of property taxes. We got the blue part that takes up most of the market value of the receiver's lien. And then if we're lucky, we get a surplus at the end. The surplus just goes to whoever's next in line. A lot of times it's the mortgage company, but sometimes we do get some money going back to the owner. The receiver has to, so other things the receiver that we look at for a great receiver are sort of a track record with receiverships, but they don't always have to have a ton of experience. Time to be able to complete the work, and that they're organized, just because we need to see all those invoices. They've got to keep track of all the invoices. They've got to keep track of sort of the tally of their liens, so we know exactly how much they're spending, when they're spending, and we need them to do those receiver reports that get filed with the court. So those are just a couple things. I mean, of course, we're willing to explain and work with a receiver, especially if it's their first receivership. I kind of already talked about this. And I do have a couple of result pictures, and that's just a picture of the AG at one of the properties in Worcester. But so this property was actually a mixed use property in Miller's Falls. It was kind of sort of in the center of town there. And then it was sort of elevated up too. So it was a multi-unit property. I think there was like a small commercial garage attached to it. So there was multiple units here, and it was a huge project. And what the receiver did was, after approval from our office and the court, was allowed to repair a unit, get a certificate of occupancy, and then rent out the unit while he was working on the other units. And so I say this, but not that it's ugly, but old and ugly doesn't mean it's not up to code. So
wow.
Yeah, no, and it's pretty big. And this is just like a tiny part of it. So the receiver is able to keep a lot of the floors and doors and woodwork, and you can see the ceiling there. And of course that keeps costs down. He did have to replace a lot of the windows though, and that brought the cost up, because they're, of course, like they're not standard size and they're all weird and stuff. But having the ability to rent out a unit during this process, I think frees the receiver to take on bigger projects. So this is great. what happened here was the receiver actually didn't end up losing money. I think he still owns it, but he's renting it out. So it worked out. There's people living in there, and it looks pretty great. This property in Ashfield, it actually just sold. This was on the market. I think there must have been some kind of small bidding war, I guess, because I saw that it the offer was above the asking price. So this is right across from the lake there, and it's kind of like on the side of a mountain hilltop. So it had all kinds of issues. So I mean, it was essentially just built, I think, in the 30s as just sort of a lake-ish cabin. And so the majority of it didn't have drywall, and it looked like this. There was no actual real heating. It was just, I think there might be one of those stoves in here too. And then the receiver had to do a lot of work to make sure that the whole building didn't sort of slide down off the side of the mountain there. And it had all these, like, little porches and stairs everywhere that of course had to be up to code and safe. And then he had to put in beams, and he had to, I don't know all the complex contractor work, but he had to put in additional structures to secure the property and make sure it's safe. And then here too, he was able to keep some of the original wood. So that's great. And I think actually this one, there might be some funds going back to the owner. So hopefully, I don't have the full calculations yet, but we're hoping. And this is sort of my example of our affordable housing. So one of our goals sort of in our change from our initiative to division is to try to get more affordable housing units. So this will be the first affordable housing unit in Becket. Here we had an owner who had passed away. So we did have probate issues and things like that, but I think we've, crossed my fingers, worked through all that. But the house is just like this. It was also no drywall. I mean, there was like beds and mattresses. I say beds, but mattresses. There was a family living there. And before the owner passed away, I think they parted ways, but they were living there, and the owner was slowly fixing it. And so it's going to be a 40B loan, excuse me, and it'll be a lottery house. So we did run into some problems here because the septic system was put in the wrong place, and the previous owner hadn't, of course, it wasn't up to code, and of course it's Becket, so it's cold and frozen, and there was some kind of rock they had to dig through and soil samples and things like that. But we finally got it through, so we're the house is complete, and they're just waiting for the applications for the lottery to come in, and I think it'll close at the beginning of April. So hopefully we'll have somebody in there soon. And then grants. Last thing I have to talk about grants, which is probably the thing that I know least about. But I do know we have grants, and they change from time to time. Right now we have it's still called the AHI Receivership Fund. So it's up to $75,000 for a receiver, up to $100,000, and up to 30% forgiven if the unit will be affordable housing. Otherwise, they're low interest rates. It is a process to apply. We have two administrators, Chelsea Restoration and Fall River, that cover the whole state. Like I said, it's definitely a process, and we've had a few receivers take advantage of this, and so we just increased it to the $100,000. So we're kind of excited about that.
Maya, before you leave that page, can you just describe what you are defining, your program defines affordable as? Like, what does the receiver have to commit to in order to apply for that?
Well, so like a lottery house would be great. I think sometimes they might be able to do a first-time buyer situation as well. I don't know the exact, income ratios to the home value, that complicated stuff, but they will know. And then if there's any kind of issue, then whoever can reach out to me too, if they're, if they're just having a hard time trying to apply for the loan or whatever, or they have questions. Not specifically like that, because I don't know the answers, but if I don't know, my supervisor will know too. We have also a specific person that in our office that deals with just certain types of grants. So
thanks.
I think it's not super strict. I think it's just the normal, because DCHD also has, I think they also give money. So I think it's in those parameters.
Mhm. And you have a question in the chat from Brandy about whether as part of the process to either come into or go through this process, there's a lead inspection required.
No,
So when the receiver makes the house for sale, they don't have to do a lead inspection.
oh, if it's, so I thought going into our office, going into the program, no. I think if there, whatever the qualifications the town needs for to get a certificate of occupancy, then yes.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I think so, but let's check with Brandy. Yep,
Or
she
Randy,
says, okay, thank you. Okay.
because most of the time while the process is happening, whoever goes out and inspects the permits and things like that, we're not always involved in all that process. I mean, we can certainly help facilitate, especially if there's a new receiver or a relationship that sort of hasn't developed through the receivership process. But most of the time, all that stuff is done and I don't even know about it until at the end when I'm like, is it okay? And we have a certificate of occupancy. Okay. So that stuff I'm usually not quite as involved in.
So if a town, for instance, has private well testing regulations or something, that's on the receiver to comply with that and
Absolutely.
right. Okay. Laura, I think that probably answers your question. But if not, oh, yep. Okay. See a little thumbs up. You guys can also, once she's done, you're
Oh, I'm done.
we can stop sharing our screen and you can turn your cameras on or unmute and ask questions if you like. Great. Well, that was a wonderful overview of such an amazing program and such a great resource. Does anyone have follow-up questions that we haven't addressed here? Yes, MJ.
Maya, can you talk about the time frame from when you when the Board of Health condemns the property and you're involved in it to when it actually hits the receivership and it can be put into the receivership process? We've got a couple properties up in Greenfield that have taken quite a while to navigate the path.
I know. And then we've got the two that actually didn't quite make it into receivership. The two
Oh yeah, one of them sold last week.
Yeah,
I saw in the red and the question I had was I didn't see anything in the registry that indicated some sort of requirement that there be any specific performance by the new buyer to deal with the issues that were at play.
So that's a great question. So when that happens, usually, we'll allow the owner to sell the property and we won't close the case until the municipality is happy with the progress that they're making. Sometimes, each municipality has different levels. Some are like, okay, if they start pulling permits, some are okay if they want to see some kind of progress, like a new roof or something like that. So we wait for you to make sure that it's okay. For that case, and I can send it to you. I thought I sent it to Jen. Their new buyer sort of sent a letter of intent of what they wanted to do with the property. And I think they're probably. So especially if it's somebody like that who has some sort of experience in rehabbing properties or some kind of contract work, then that makes me feel a little bit better. But we wait until you guys are okay with us dismissing the case.
And MJ's first question was like, just in general, for the uninitiated here, how long does this process tend to take?
Yes, it does not happen overnight.
It does not happen overnight. And I did say that I'm slow, so.
You did say that right at the beginning. It's true.
I did say that. I think that COVID's made it slower than usual. We're starting to pick things up again, but I am the only one out here in Western Mass. So like I said, I'm slow. So from the start of when a municipality refers a property to our office to receivership point, that was the question, MJ? Okay, so usually it's about 3 to 6 months. That would be our usual time frame from when that starts. Sometimes it depends, like, to if the owner calls us, or if we have an unresponsive owner, we can usually move much faster. But we have somebody calling us and saying they're trying to sell, they're trying to make the repairs. Like I said, we want to make sure that we can tell the judge that we've done everything we possibly could have done before we're trying to appoint this receiver to the property.
Thank you. MJ, did you have a follow-up question or?
Just a question about, I know that historically you preferred to work only with vacant properties, but can you speak a little about how we should think about it, or what we should be doing if the property is occupied, and how you interact with those properties and the local board of health and the community on that?
So I know that there's that one property in Greenfield. Well, that one.
Apparently not only one.
So it has to be pretty bad for us to try to get involved in a property. I think sometimes it's a little bit different if there's just tenants as opposed to an owner occupied property. I don't want to say just tenants, it's just tenants, but if the owner's not living there. And so I have to go through a lot to get it to that point to get through the approval process to do that. So it does take a lot. I'm not saying in the future it'll it might not be as much to go through to try to get properties that are occupied in our program. So it's just something that we're working through and exploring, and we want to see kind of how it goes, just because they are much more difficult, and there's a lot more to consider when we go through that process. So
right. And there's a question in the chat from Amy from DPH about, could you explain the benefit to the receiver?
So maybe I didn't cover that.
In that blue part of the house, are they making money there? Are they?
So this isn't a huge money-making venture realistically. So, but they can put in all of their legal fees, all of their work, their parts, their labor, administrative costs go in there. And so that's what the lien gets built on. And so if we have, usually it's, if there's like, a contractor, a receiver who's also a contractor, sometimes they might lay the floor. So they'll put in what their labor costs are. If they're reasonable, then they don't get challenged. So that's how they might make money that way. But this isn't like a huge money making, thing usually for a receiver, because even if the property, the one that I was talking about in Ashfield, that property sold over the market value price, the asking price, but the receiver is not going to keep all that money. They also have to pay, real estate costs and, advertising costs and things like that, legal fees. So all that gets put into their lien, but anything that's left over isn't going to go to them.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone else have a question about, I don't recall whether I heard you say that in the past, it's been my understanding that to join this program, a Board of Health needs to vote to officially enter the program. Is that still true?
So no, it's however the internal processes of the municipality. I've just had ones that just say, we want to work with you, and whoever said that's okay. I've been to actual board meetings where they vote on it right after I give my presentation. So it just depends on the municipality and how sort of their internal governmental works happen.
Okay. That's
we
evolved.
Don't need anything formal or anything.
Right. In the past, I think it was quite formal. It was like you had to all be there. A quorum of you had to see the presentation. You had to vote to join. So that may be more flexible now, which is good to hear.
Yeah, we like to have a presentation so we can sort of present and have a chance for anyone to ask questions or whatever, but it doesn't have to be at a meeting. And sometimes, like I said before, they have been at meetings, but.
And so we'll have the recording of this also. If somebody has fellow Board of Health members who aren't here today, or, that they would like to show it to them, we can do that. Okay. I'm just scanning around here to see if anyone else has questions, or if you work regularly with this program, you have tips for your colleagues on what you've done with it, or how to make it go easier. We are also,
we're always looking for feedback or ways to improve, because we're not perfect and things happen, and everybody just tries to do the best they can, but any way we can improve, be great.
Do you ever have a situation where, I guess this was probably true in Miller's Falls, where the receiver will take a number of properties sort of near each other at the same time, but separate individual properties with separate, title histories and owners and things like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know Phoebe and I, we both talked about this a little bit beforehand. So I mean, sometimes we have a hard time getting a receiver. Sometimes there's, only a receiver that's available to work in a particular area. We like to, spread around the receiverships to others, but sometimes it's just not going to happen. So yes, so we've had in Miller's Falls, there's been a particular receiver who has had a few properties up there, but at that time, he was the only one that was available and willing to do the property. So
Okay, but it is possible to, right, since it was possible there for, if people have multiple properties, I'm thinking that.
Yes,
That may be
yeah.
true here, that may be a better deal for a receiver because they're going to have multiple in play.
Yeah, and if there's some kind of, I know we've done like veterans housing where we've taken a bunch of properties on a street and kind of turned it into sort of, kind of like a complex for veterans that included sort of like a community center and then housing also. So if there's anything like that, we'd love to help as best we can. If anybody has any ideas or, just sending it out there. So
The other thing I just wanted to clarify, because other people may also be wondering this, certainly there's a growing awareness of the lack of affordable housing out here. Is the only tool through your program to keeping a property affordable to apply through that Chelsea and that other so essentially to convince the receiver to qualify to apply for that subsidy, that $100,000 subsidy, in order to keep the building affordable? Is that how? So if a community has identified properties and they want them to be not sold to the highest bidder, is that the only way to do that through this program?
So probably yes. We're currently working on a pilot program that sort of is trying to cut costs and trying to have sort of nonprofits have access to housing. I'm completely explaining it not very well, and I apologize for that. But it's still it hasn't really been taken off yet, and we're still in the process of doing it. So we're seeing sort of how that works to see if we can bring it to other areas. And we are using money from that fund to help in that pilot program. So we're trying to expand that program, and if there's any ideas, we'd love to hear them. But realistically, probably yes. I don't know if our office would be willing to help if somebody had sort of an idea how we could do it faster, using maybe those funds somehow. I think that'd be something that we'd be open to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. It's always nice when the government is flexible and creative. Glad to hear it. All right, people, I'm scanning the faces of those of you whose faces I can see and the chat and see whether there is, other than someone, our health agent here, saying they're looking forward to seeing you on Monday. You do have a question now about whether this can be used for historical buildings or town-owned buildings, or is it just largely residential? I know you said you have a little tiny bit of commercial in there.
Yeah, so I mean, it also depends too, I think maybe what the use might be afterwards for the historical property.
Right, understood. So as long as it's becoming housing, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
But
with a town-owned building, it's not abandoned.
Right. Sometimes we do have different grants that pop up from time to time.
Okay.
Ones that are for just municipalities or like a demo grant or something like that. But currently we just have that one.
So Laura, I guess the answer is it might be worth calling to go over the details of what you're thinking there. Okay. I don't see any other questions here, and we promised you an hour, and we will get you out on time. I want to just put in the chat. Here are the next two coming up workshops. The first one is on private wells for public health, the bill. So it's an information session about that bill. And the second one featuring our fabulous folks from the Division of Community Sanitation on rec camp inspections. And then coming up soon, an epidemiology 101 with somebody from Katie Brown's staff and Serve Safe for health inspectors. So just want to let you know what is on the docket for other workshops from the Western Mass Public Health Association, and thank Maya so much for being our inaugural workshop for this year and for being willing to slog on out to our communities and help us make them better. So really, really grateful
Absolutely.
for your time and your energy. And everyone, we will have all your names because hopefully Zoom worked the way it should and collected your email addresses. And so you'll get the slides and the link to this recording to share with people.
Sounds good.
All right. Great. Thank you all so much, and get out there and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya.
Sure. And I'm around if anybody needs me, so.
Okay,
Cool.
well, she can stay here if you want. Yes, if anybody wants to ask any questions.
Or later on.
Or later. Okay, we won't keep you here all afternoon.
I'm still here. Thank you.
All right. Sounds
Hey,
like
Bea,
a-
do we have a plan where we were supposed to meet on the first property on Monday? Is that on Creamery Ave, maybe?
I think so. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
which is right off of Route 2. You can see it right from Route 2.
Okay.
Creamery
Boy,
Ave.
does it need help. And it's a multifamily. I'm so excited you're going to look at it.
'Cause when I
Great.
looked at the address, it said Shelburne Falls. But it's like right on, it's right. It's one of those like mysterious ones where it's really tries to tell me that it's in a different town, right?
Correct.
It
It
literally
is in the town
It's-
of Buckland, but it is in the
Yep.
village of Shelburne Falls.
Yeah, Maya, it's right across from the entrance where you would go into Buckland and Shelburne Falls.
Okay. I kind of, yeah, when I Googled it, I kind of like, I could tell sort of where it was. So I'm sure I could find it. But I just wanted to make sure I was going to the right one.
Yeah.
It can be tricky. It can be tricky
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, I know. Absolutely. You put it in and you say, and it comes up as Heath, and you're like, wait a minute.
I had a property in Windsor that was like something access road number 3 route. It was right off the pond there, and it was just not. It was hard, but I made it there.
All
Just
right.
saying.
Well, I guess they'll see you there that morning. MJ, did you have something you want?
Yeah, I was gonna check in with Maya about our Conway Street property and see what the status is of that.
So that's the owner occupied one, right?
Well, he's not really there.
I don't mean owner occupied. I mean tenant occupied. I'm sorry.
Well, it's vacant right now. It's been vacant for about a year.
Conway Street. I'm sorry. I was focusing on another one. All right. So Conway Street. So for Conway Street, what I think is going to end up happening is the bank is going to foreclose on that property.
All right.
So he was going to list the property. We're giving him until March 15th to list the property.
Okay.
I don't think he's actually going to list the property.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that we're giving him the benefit of